So don't censor yourself that way. It's a question, it's a question. Yeah, Oliver.
You mentioned Orlando this morning,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of other violent places on Earth. And I've just had a number of close people die around me recently.
Yeah.
All of which has really emphasized that time of death is it's unpredictable. And when it happens, we may not be in the state that we think we want to be or hope to be. It's very possible to die in a state of fear or dementia or extreme pain or
Yeah.
a lot of ways that we wouldn't have chosen to go. What's important at the moment of death? And is it different from what's important at any other moment in a person's life?
So, what's important at the moment of death? And is it any different than at any other moment of life? Wow. Let's just sit with that for a second or two. Ask yourself that question. What's important at the moment of death? Would it be different than what's important right now in this moment? So what comes to you, Oliver, when you think about that, about your friends, about Orlando, anywhere in the world? What do you think?
I think I would have had more confidence in the answer before all that happened.
You're having less confidence now? Huh?
That's really why I asked the question. I remember Julia once saying that a moment of awareness at the time of death was worth something.
Usually it's many hours of practice.
Something like that, maybe even lives of practice.
Yeah.
But I've just become very aware recently how crazy things get around that doorway.
Yeah.
And I've actually been feeling some hopelessness around the value of trying to feel aware at the moment of death. It just feels like kind of an unfair goal. And if the moment of death comes and you're high on morphine or you're terrified, it's going to be very different than if you're dying peacefully in a monastery with people around you praying for you.
Yeah.
And why is it that one person would die in in a terrible situation where it seems like if your next birth is determined by the state of your nature, that they're just condemned to some terrible rebirth, whereas just because of, unfair circumstances.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm really struggling with it.
Yeah,
I really am.
and you're not the only one. You asked about 3 questions in there, which have to do with karma, awareness of what? Awareness of what though? And the terrors we might have at the time of death.
Mm-hmm.
So, where to begin? I think it's important for us to ask when we say be aware, what is awareness? And in this practice, what we're headed for through the guidance of our kind teachers is Buddha nature. Here, there, 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 there. So if we practice and grow our awareness of Buddha nature, that doesn't go away in a terrifying situation. It goes away now for us because our practice is weak. Period. That's the karmic consequence. When you see practitioners whose practice is quite strong, and we do see them, if you want, you can just look at photographs, the Dalai Lama, etc. That's not their experience at the time of death, or even during the time where their people are being killed, or they don't get caught in the terror, the anger, the discouragement. This is not a criticism of us, it's just a fact. It's like looking at, are you able to run the 26-mile marathon yet or not? No, I'm training for it, and I'm only able to walk swiftly around the block. Then that's where I am. But keep doing that until you build the strength of mind and heart toward our Buddha nature. So we're not just aware like basic mindfulness of, a guy is shooting everyone. But the awareness goes far beyond that. The awareness sees this is not, now I'm going to describe something I have little to no experience about, but I have had good teachings from authentic teachers about. It's not, I'm aware of my terror, I'm aware the guy is shooting. It's an awareness when we get to the level that we're headed for, that understands this situation is completely interdependent, impermanent, impure, passing, and through it, it opens the door to all kinds of, we worked on it last Sunday, huge compassion. So let me give a very concrete example with Orlando. Horrible situation. I heard 2 stories. I don't listen too much because we also get sucked into listening a lot, and it builds our fear generally, and it builds our discouragement. 2 stories going each way. One was the young woman, many of you have probably heard, who was in the bathroom locked in on the cell phone to her mom, screaming and yelling and crying for hours, and died, bled to death, with her friend right there, totally loving her, accompanying her to the very end. What a difference that makes. You're in a horrible situation, but this great kindness and love is right there with you. Both things are there. But then yesterday I heard a story of a young entrepreneur down there who opened his mini apartments to all family members who were flying in for the funerals and memorials for free, put them up, put this out on the website. All of a sudden, people were offering medical care and food and transportation from the airport. And just a flood of kindness and compassion comes in. So these horrible situations, they also are completely interdependent. Okay? Now here's the really tough question that you raise up. Well, two. One is, what do we do? And I'll put that over here on the side for a minute. I think you know the answer because your question had it in it. Is it different than this moment? We have to do the same practice no matter what's happening. So we have to become unshakable. That's a word for Buddha mind, unshakable. We're not there yet. Give ourselves a break. We're human. So while we're on the way to unshakable, we're going to shake plenty. And then we bring compassion to our own shaking. And say, wow, I'm just a little pony here. Don't put the load of an ox on me. Don't do that to yourself. Be kind. Be as kind as you can. See the interdependence as much as you can. See the kindness that springs out of these horrible situations. It always does. 911, tons of light came out of that darkness. So much beauty of people taking care of each other, going, wow, this woke me up. I was in a daze. You know, I need to do these things. This is always true, but the tougher piece for me, and I think it is for a lot of people, it's even hard for me to bring up, is karma. Because what makes it tough is we are immersed, whether you got raised in a religion or not, we're immersed in a good, bad, black, white, punishment, reward culture. So when we look at karma and the teachings on karma, and you're asking, why does one person die like that and one dies like that? They created the causes and conditions to die in a monastery surrounded by someone. That was the example you used. And these folks created the causes and conditions to die that way. But it is not punishment. It is not reward. And we go right to, well, that sounds like the old religion, punishment and reward. So I reject karma. Mm-hmm. Well, you can reject karma all you want, but it's going to function. It functions. So we create the causes and conditions right now. We're creating it. This moment here in this beautiful space, together with our hearts open, we're creating the causes and conditions to help everyone, including ourselves. But we don't know if you open to the Buddhist worldview, which is the only thing I can teach here. I can't screw it around and say, oh, if it scares you to think of rebirth, you don't have to have that. I can't do that. I have to teach what the Buddha taught. Or I shouldn't sit here. So the Buddha taught the Buddhist worldview. You don't have to accept it, but I need to teach it. The Buddhist worldview is beginningless time, because we can't find a first cause. What would be the cause of the first cause? One of the meditations is find something in the world that has no cause. So you can sit a lot of hours with that, and I've sat some. Find something. So far, I'm hitting 0. Everything has cause. So the first cause, like God or all one or whatever, would have to have a cause. And where did that cause come from, and where did that cause come from? So the Buddhist worldview is beginningless time. It's also endless time. What goes, not this soul body, it's going, thank God. I don't want to cling to it. It's decrepiting. A new word. It's decrepiting. And so are all of your bodies. That's the nature. I don't want to hang on to it forever. What I do care about is my mind stream. I kind of inherited it from folks before, endless, beginningless time. You know, somebody did really good. I don't think it was Zopa because I was very naughty before I was 40, very naughty. Ask anybody who knew me. And I think I piled up some really rough karma that I lived through. And, but since then I've been working at the Dharma, hoping to become a kind of a mind stream that goes on, takes another form, another form, another form, that becomes increasingly useful to help lead others out of suffering. What else is there to do? So if I'm here and someone walks in the door and starts shooting, I know what my values are. That's where I'm going. I want to be, and I intend to be, as kind and clear in that moment as I can be. But I want to do that the next moment too. So there, you answered your question. I think the question's so beautiful. You must know the answer. That is the same job. My mother would say it's a job. It's the same job right now and tomorrow. And if your brother's hitting you, it's the same job as if your brother's giving you a present. You love him. And sure, you stop the hitting. You don't say it's okay to hit me. And sure, you appreciate the gift. But your job doesn't change. So it's the same if someone's shooting us. It's the same if someone's loving us. So that's what we're growing in our practice. So it's not a kind of a bare awareness, like I'm holding a cup. That's good to know. I'm in a group. That's good to know. But it's not bare awareness. The Buddhist mind is total compassion, has no other thing in it, and total wisdom. They don't have any other agendas. We do. We're confused, but we're moving out of it. And we use these methods to move out. That was a lot, but I hope it's helpful. Let's just take a minute and breathe. Let's see if Eric wants to add something else from your kind heart.
You mentioned feeling discouraged, Molly. What can you say what it is you're feeling discouraged about?
I feel discouraged about discouraged about the length of the path. So you're talking about being aware of Buddha nature, of my own Buddha nature in a moment of extreme, well actually, you know, to be honest, what scares me more is not a gunman, but going by dementia. You know, working my whole life on my mind and then losing my mind in the last few years. That seems like a more difficult obstacle. So, but in any event, like being aware of this ineffable thing that maybe I have kind of glimpsed through the fog a few times in an ungraspable way a long time ago. But the reality is when I sit down and meditate, the odds that I'm even on my breath, even on bare awareness when the bell goes is less than 50-50 in a calm room.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
And then that's like the first step. I read about the stages of meditation. There's 9 stages. I don't even seem to qualify for stage 1 mostly.
Yeah.
And then the final stage of that is only stability, which launches into further. It's like, maybe I should have picked an easier religion. This is just like
Easier
worse
religion.
than graduate school.
Graduate or something.
It sounds like a wonderful goal. The amount of effort required to get to it sounds like a profitable place when I come to that important moment in my life. Is just, it seems like it takes more resources than I have. That's where the discouragement comes from.
Well, I guess I'll just share when we both kind of came up to KCC at the same time, and you greeted me and said, "Happy Father's Day." And my experience of that moment was that I was meeting somebody whose practice is written all over their face. And the quality of your presence is clearly one of somebody who has done practice. So the funny thing about practicing mindfulness is as you become increasingly present, you're also increasingly present to all the times that you're not present. And so it forever seems like you're just in exactly the same place. But having known you for a long time, my experience of you is that you're not the same.
I agree with that.
And then I think one thing that might be happening is you may be conflating or mistaking the moment of death with the last moments of life. And that's where Zopa started this morning, right? The first noble truth is life is suffering. And part of that suffering is we don't get to choose the conditions under which we live or die. And we have bodies, and we have pain, and we have suffering, and but that's right, the moment of death is so interesting. Because when we don't have a body anymore, we're not subject to the same conditions. We're not subject to the condition of our demented brain or our fragile human body. And so what conditions are we subject to? It's kind of a mystery, right? Because of my work, I get to talk to people who've died and come back. Maybe part of the way there, but then got pulled back. And the ones who remember describe the process in a way that is incredibly reassuring. People who've been resuscitated, people most of the ones that remember come back and they're like, okay, that was not bad. I can do that. Now on the outside, what you would have seen is you would have seen about 8 different people like me, like pushing on their chest and shoving tubes down their throat and whatnot. And I don't think it would have looked particularly pleasant or peaceful at all. But it just goes to show you, you don't know. You know what it looks like on the outside, and you don't know what it looks like on the inside. And a group of sort of Western. It included Joan Halifax. They were at a conference and they asked the Dalai Lama. They're like, "Wow, in the West, it's really if you die in a hospital, you're going to be loaded with medication and morphine, and are we depriving people of this moment?" And the Dalai Lama said, "No." He said that none of those things can touch the ground of the mind. And then just, and I think with dementia, I think it's kind of a mystery what their experience is like. I heard a sweet story from a geriatrician on Friday. She was taking care of a man who was 96, and she said he had a 3rd grade education. And his family wanted to know when he was going to, how much longer he was going to go on like this. And Elizabeth said, "Well, probably will die sometime in the next year or 2. But then one day he started reciting the Lord's Prayer. And this was strange because nobody ever knew that he knew the Lord's Prayer. But he just started saying it. And no one was clear, since he never went to church, at what point in his life he would have even learned the Lord's Prayer. But out it started coming. So even though he seemed to be doing fine, his geriatrician, being imaginative, called the hospice and said, "Well, I know there's not a diagnosis here, but could you take the guy on? It just seems like this is he's gone 96 years without reciting the Lord's Prayer. This must be
Something's going on."
And indeed, he did die over the next 2 or 3 weeks. But I think that, I'm also reminded of the Karmapa's comment that practicing for one moment in your life is of limitless value. And I think the reason that he said that was because every moment that you practice in your life, every moment in your life, you're practicing something. When we do our Dharma practice, we're practicing so that when the moment of death comes, we can wake up. And we can look. And we cannot make the mistake of thinking that all of our experiences are what we are. And I don't think any practice is ever lost. I don't think Alzheimer's or any amount of drugs or And we're beyond that. We have no body. And if the last moment of our life was one of terror, then we're by definition free of that. At the moment of death. But I think the question you had, the first question, or the question that you asked, what's important at the moment of death? Is it different from what's now? I have a lot of people that have that question. I think the times in your life where you're closer to death or you can see death are times to really reflect on that question. Because it's hard. It's hard to actually see from that perspective. You can say logically, yes, I know I'm going to die. But to actually experience the world in that way is difficult. So the value of these experiences is that sometimes you can kind of see the edge. And that can give you a different perspective on your life. And that's very valuable. And if you spend enough time there, you start to see the difference between grief and discouragement. And then it's not discouraging anymore. Still sad.
So the awareness piece that you've obviously been practicing, because you can't come to those kind of questions without it, can be turned anywhere. So you turn it to, I'm aware of my discouragement. That's a great step. There are many, I would say millions of people walking around the world that are discouraged, and they think that's a normal mind state. There's no awareness, asleep. This is true for most of us. We're all asleep about some kind of difficulty we have. Otherwise we wouldn't need any practice. We'd be there. So then you can turn to an encouragement. Good on you, Oliver. You're aware of your discouragement. Now you can look at it. And just as Eric just said, is that what it is, or am I really conflating grief with discouragement? Maybe I just need to grieve. Or maybe I'm angry. Maybe this. You just, not to conjure those things, but just get aware. Look, the awareness is like a child looking at a butterfly for the first time of life and going, wow, what is that? And quietly really looking, all the pieces, and they untangle themselves because there's nothing solid there. Discouragement is not solid. Anger isn't. We know that conceptually, but we're trying to bring it to the heart mind. Impermanent. Thank you for that question so much. It's quite heart-opening.
Thank you.
But we need to encourage ourselves. Encourage our own practice. Did you have something, Peter?
In the context of the previous discussion, this seems irrelevant, but it's probably, I guess, my question in some ways is, if it's irrelevant, how do I dispose of it? I've been reading Jewel Ornament of,
Liberation.
yeah, and I'm sort of put off by the discussion of 18 ghost regions and 5
Yes.
families and
Yeah, join the crowd.
so
The
on and so
6
forth.
realms
And
of suffering. Yeah.
yes,
I
and
don't like that.
my attraction to Buddhism is the clear direction it offers me for living a more skillful and worthwhile life. And it just seems to me to be irrelevant and confusing to be trying to consider 18 ghost realms, etc., etc.
Yeah, yeah, got the question. And I think if anybody reads about the classic texts like Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand or the Jewel Ornament or the Long Rim, you bump into these 6 realms. The hell realm, hungry ghosts, animal, human, demigods, and God. And there's sub. And we go, I ran away from Catholicism for getting away from this stuff. But the teachings, and I struggle with the same thing. I think of 2 things that in the struggle, asking teachers, more than one teacher over and over about that. First answer is, the Dharma's a huge medicine chest. Don't take all of them at once. Just don't do it. It's like opening up your medicine chest and taking a little of everything. Just read it and then say, Tylenol works for me. I'm going to use that. I don't know about those other things. Interesting. Just let them be interesting. And let them go. Because it's toxic for you right now. That's number 1. The second thing is those realms, at least how they work for me, and the teachers say, they're mental states. So can we imagine getting so angry that we are in a hell realm ourselves in the moment, you know? Of course, I felt that kind of anger, total fury, total disregard, total fear, total aggression, you know. That's the hell realm. You don't need to go looking someplace, you know. It's right here. So one way to approach them, especially for us who've been so harmed by these kind of teachings of hells and heavens and blah, blah, is to see in our own minds, when do I move around in those realms? Hungry ghost is total desire. Anybody here have any kind of addiction, even to coffee, even to cookies, even to your best friend? Yeah, we all do. That's hungry ghost realm. It can be mild, it can be huge. You might have a methamphetamine addiction, it's huge, you know. That's hungry ghost realm. You don't have to go outside the human realm to see these. God realms are those who have lots of pleasure, lots of wealth, and don't give a rip about anyone else. That pleasure and that wealth keeps them from even, I don't care about you, I've got my 7 mansions. My corporation's making lots of money. That's a God realm, you know. Animal realm, you can even see in the human realm, it's like that kind of a human life where due to karma, you just eat, sleep, work, you know, grab, pull, push, you know, like little animals do. Constantly scared, where's the next thing coming from? So we can see all these. And they say in the teachings that the human realm is the best place to be because to practice the path. Because we're not so distracted by pleasure as the gods. We're not so horrified by life and scrambling as hungry ghosts or hell realm beings. We have a little bit of both. We have enough suffering to wake us up, and we have enough resources to practice. You know, yeah, I got my food, my place, I can sit, I can do that. So I just don't go there very much because I've said before, I got raised up fundamental Catholic, like pre-Vatican, like whew, hell realms, you know, everywhere, as though fear would drive us to goodness. I don't think it did. And so, open the medicine cabinet and take the parts that work. And since we have endless lives, eventually we'll be the doctor. We'll be the doctor. And we won't even need medicines. We'll be helping others.
I wish someone would do a translation where instead of saying there are 18 realms that are named things that don't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
Someone had done a translation and said that the fourth hell realm is when this is happening, or this kind of thing is happening.
Yeah, I love that too. And the danger is, I think what that's about is we need to be sure we don't lose any of these things because we don't quite like them or we're not comfortable or they bug us, because then we're in danger of losing the whole Dharma because everyone will have something they don't like. But then the translators do it as clear as they can, true to the original. And then the commentaries are what come in and help us. Like, okay, this is what this actually is referring to. And on different levels, different teachers will tell you, no, there is such a place. But all places are impermanent, unreal, unsolid.
Empty.
And empty. But we create the place. You all created this. You came here this morning, so you created this. We created this together. So last question today.
I just wanted to say, in one of Trungpa Rinpoche's book, I think it's The Power of Myth, I think that's what it's called, he actually does explain it, not as specific as, 18 and da-da-da, but each realm, and puts the name, animal, human, God, and hungry ghost, and explains it in a way of like identifying it into present day life.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, going through it just that way and say, if the 11th kind of hell realm is when you might act this way towards someone. And then you go, oh, I get it, I do that. Yeah. So the commentaries are where to look for that. They're not going to change the translations because we're in danger as Buddhism comes here of making it cool for us. And, then we might lose some authenticity, which might be the piece that actually leads us to wake up. So we want to do that. Okay, we have a couple minutes, but I think it might behoove to just sit in silence and take in what we just heard from friends. And just think for a minute what you might take away from today's beautiful discussion. That really touches your heart, your situation, your family. And you might, if it feels right to you, make kind of a commitment to take forward the qualities that you've nurtured here out into the world. Share them. Sharing your improved presence with the world. Just being there with your Buddha qualities. We do our dedication to make sure that the beautiful merit we've created here gets given away. So we don't hold on. amid this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Hope to see you next week, or Wednesday for Chinrezi, or is Tuesday a Tara Day? I can never track.
I think it's the second and fourth Tuesday.
Second and fourth Tuesday. Okay.
Thank you. Is that posted on the calendar?